Welcome back to the Skyfall Sessions. I'm your host, John. We had some shocking news coming out of Iowa recently. Just last night, Iowa, which is usually a very red state, usually Trump would easily be up. New polls came out, the Ann Selzer poll, that actually had Kamala up by 3 points, 47 to 44 in Iowa, which is just unprecedented. Never would have expected this, and this could have huge implications for the elections. But I'm going to go ahead and tune in with the Bulwark, who actually has Ann Selzer on. So let's get right into that.
People looked at my methodology, and it's published. There's no secret sauce. People sometimes think that. It's published in every article in the Des Moines Register, right there, how we do it. But you look at it on paper and you go, it's too simple. This can't possibly work. And so far it has, but I'm prepared that one day it will not work, and that I'll blow up into tiny little pieces and be scattered across the city of Des Moines.
Hello and welcome to a bonus Sunday edition of the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We got the shock Selzer Iowa poll last night, 47 to 44 among likely voters in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris in Iowa. So obviously we had to have an emergency pod with the queen herself, Ann Selzer, president of the polling firm Selzer & Company. She's best known for conducting the Iowa poll for the Des Moines Register. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tim. Good to be with you.
No tiara for the queen today.
I leave my tiaras and my crystal balls at home.
Okay. Well, let's just start first with what happened in the poll. I got to tell you, I looked at it 3 times before I realized that Kamala was winning. I just saw 47-44, and I was like, that's pretty good for the vice president, down 3. And then it took me about 2 minutes for it to like register that she was up 3. So anyway, I'm wondering at the top level what you saw as happening in the poll, and then we'll kind of go through the particulars.
I don't think anybody would look at the numbers and not be, in a somewhat state of shock. We started interviewing Monday night, so Tuesday morning I walked in, my assistant was already crunching numbers, and she said, did you see the unweighted data? I go, yeah, I'd like to see the weighted data. Yeah.
Right.
So we're always very cautious about embracing things too much. I'm always telling my clients, don't get married to these numbers because they can change. But all they did was confirm what we were seeing in the unweighted data after Monday night, that Harris was in the lead in Iowa. And that was, nobody in their right mind would predict it. Our methodology is to make no assumptions, and we made no assumptions, and here we are.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, quite a remarkable change from your poll over the early summer that had President Biden down 18, to a poll in September that had it significantly closer to this one.
Just to put it in context, that's a 21-point swing. Unprecedented. Absolutely just outrageous swing.
Like, what are you seeing as having been the impetus for such a dramatic turnaround?
I can't give you a data-driven answer, which would be my preference.
Sure.
What it seems like, given that just this morning we released the findings from the congressional races, and we are now showing 2 Iowa districts tilting toward the Democratic candidate, and that includes a big lead in the 1st district, which is 53 to 37. And that district in particular has the driving issue, from what I read, has been the abortion issue. And it was over the summer that Iowa's 6-week ban on abortion went into effect after all the court challenges were taken care of. So that's the decision being made, the law going into force, and then people living with it for a while, and it being a strong, sort of compelling thing from Iowa's in the congressional districts. Iowa right now, all 4 congressional districts are held by Republicans. So to me, it seems like to a certain extent, there's something organic going on, because the presidential candidates certainly aren't spending any money or time here.
Right.
And it may be, in fact, that these congressional races are driving the presidential race toward the Democrat.
I want to get into the congressional races a little deeper, but just a couple other things at the presidential level first. The gender gap is particularly noteworthy, and you look at independent women, older women in particular. Talk about what you found on that, and which obviously could also speak to the abortion question.
Right. Well, the pollsters who work with contests that are going to be decided by a gender gap typically say you need to win with women more than you lose with men. And we're seeing that in these data right now. So men are 52-38 for Trump, but the margin is wider, 56-36, a 20-point gap with women for Harris. The gap for women age 65 and over, and this, the age 65 and over group, I've been watching this whole cycle because they, in past cycles, have tilted more Republican, but now they are strongly tilted toward Harris, and the margin among women 65 and over is more than 2-1.
Yeah, remember there are more women in like by population in the United States, and women are voting at higher rates in the United States. And this election in particular, different demographics of women are leaning more towards Harris.
63-28.
Wow.
Again, that's sort of a jaw-dropping number.
Yeah, I wonder. Did you? I didn't actually look at this. Do you do a religion crosstab? Like, do we know, like, our church going? I do wonder how that cuts, particularly among women.
I can't give you among women, but I can give you evangelicals, which is the group that has been consistently and staunchly supportive of President Trump. And that's more than 3-1. So they haven't shaken off of their affection for the former president.
Wow. As people are looking at this, everyone's trying to explain it. They're like, okay, I mean, it's just such a dramatic result. I guess I should have noted at the top, you've been gone contrary to the conventional wisdom several times. The Obama caucuses in 2008 were right about that.
Also, I want to also really quickly point out that this Selzer company is known as like the gold standard of polling. Like it's been one of the most reliable pollings like for several years. I think it had one poll where it was way off out of like, I don't know, 8 or something like that. And that one poll had a major outlier of like a third of undecided voters who said that they would switch to the other side or could possibly switch to the other side. And that was the only one that they were off on it. Aside from that, they're considered pretty much the gold standard, the most highly respected poll. Now, I want to juxtapose that next to like Emerson College, for example. People are saying, "Oh, well, Trump's 10 up," and while Emerson College is reliable and has a relatively mid-tier reputation, it's nowhere near the reputation of Selzer, and it hasn't been nearly as accurate as Selzer. So this is definitely major.
I remember the feeling in the pit of my stomach still seeing your poll in 2016, showing Donald Trump winning by a wider margin than expected significantly in Iowa, which turned out correct.
I would say I just insert here. I have a
please.
nickname I have a couple of nicknames. One is the Outlier Queen, because people keep seeing my numbers not match others. So I've been in this seat before. The second is starting with the senatorial race between Bruce Braley and Joni Ernst. Our poll was the only one showing Joni Ernst with a comfortable lead. And I became known among those campaign workers as the harbinger of doom.
Well, the one time that was not on my side. That was my final cycle as a Republican in good standing. So I was actually consulting on the harbinger of good news side of that Senate race. But yeah, so you've been here before in the but anytime there's an outlier, look, sometimes they're just outliers, right? Like sometimes they're just like, that's just statistical modeling. Sometimes they're just outliers that don't turn out to be harbingers of doom or glory. But your outliers have tended to direct towards what the end result was going to be. But when there is an outlier, people are like, okay, what could it be? And one thing that there was a series of New York Times Siena polls today that Nate Cohn observed was that among older voters, like Democrats are more likely to like answer, right? Like there potentially is do you worry at all about kind of response bias where like older Democrats, for whatever reason, are more interested in taking the poll?
Well, our method controls for that. So our method is we're looking to end up with 800 likely voters But for people we talk to who don't qualify as a likely voter, that is, they've already voted, or they say they will definitely vote. That's the two ways you get into my pool. Then we go ahead and collect your age, your sex, and what county you live in. I think race as well. So we have demographics for the full Iowa adult 18 and over population, and we weight that to the known population parameters. So now we have a cross section of all Iowans, and we can extract from that the 800, and I think it was 808 people who qualified. So if older people are more likely to vote, and they are, they show up in my voter sample in more plentiful numbers. So for example, we had contacts with 1,038 all Iowans in order to get enough likely voters at 808. So we've controlled for that idea of response bias by making sure they're not overrepresented at the state level, and then they are what they are at the likely voter level.
Yeah, sure. I guess that would control for the fact that the likelihood of older voters, the correct amount, the likelihood is in the sample. But does it control for the fact that a specific older voters who are more likely to vote for Donald Trump might not be as likely to answer? I guess the non-response bias is the question.
Yeah, well, you can't control for that.
Right.
We do know. We weight if we have too many 65 and overs, we weight them down so that they're not overrepresented at the state level. They might look like a larger population, and they are among the likely voter sample, but that's because they're more likely to vote.
One of the other things, as you mentioned, you're the outlier queen, so you're comfortable with this. But Nate Silver wrote in his Silver Bulletin last night, talked about the cojones that you had to drop this poll, and he said basically that what we've seen out there in the industry is that there's a lot of what he calls poll herding, right? Where people are weighting things to 2020 recall vote or weighting things to this or that in order to not have a result that ends up as this much of an outlier. I'm curious. Clearly, that's not something that ever crosses your mind, but I'm curious what you think about the idea that other people are herding, and that might explain why you're so unique right now.
Yeah, I feel like to some extent they're trying to keep the numbers too stable, too even, too neck and neck, but it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And that's why her polls, because she's looking for the raw stats and she's not biased one way or the other, I think that's why her polls tend to reflect reality.
Well, and please, I am grateful to have clients who we work intimately together. They know my method, they know my history, and so the Des Moines Register had every right to say this is too far off. Nobody will believe it. We're going to can it, but they don't. Right. And I think they think like I think is we've taken our very best shot at what we think is what's true out there. We've tweaked a little bit here and there. There's things that we decided that's a corner cut that we don't want to do. And so I don't lie in bed thinking, I wish we'd done something different. So that, it doesn't mean I'm not nervous about whether my poll will be good or not good. As for other people's methodology, to be honest, that's the first thing I go looking for when a poll is published by anybody, is to see what it is that they're doing. I've kept my mouth quiet about this idea of waiting to the previous recalled vote. So how did people vote in 2020? I have a lot of questions about how that would work out actually arithmetically, but I have talked about my method as polling forward. And so what I want is my data to reveal to me without favor what this future electorate looks like. So when I hear people saying, well, we're trying to figure out what this future electorate looks like, and I kind of think to myself, why bother? It's how could you? And if you're looking at the past to say that's what the future is going to look like, to me, that's polling backward. Yeah. So you're doing something that will give you results that look like 2020, perhaps. I want results that look like 2024.
I was listening to a interview you did back after 2020, when once again you weren't quite as much of an outlier in 2020, but it was a little bit of an outlier again. It was less favorable to Biden than what the rest of the national polls were showing, particularly in the region. And it turned out to look more like the electorate that you had prognosticated. But in a kind of one of these post-op interviews, you said you did worry about like how long this method will last, right? Like that there are potential issues still with polling. I have a pollster friend of mine who called me a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, "You're being too, you're taking these polls too much at face value. It's so hard to poll 18 to 30-year-olds right now, and like we don't know." So I'm just wondering, like, what are the anxieties that you have, kind of looking at the current polling methodology?
Well, I'm guessing the anxiety level will tick up on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's sort of par for the course. I've had a good track record and like to say, may it always be so.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think, and I have said, if people looked at my methodology, and it's published, there's no secret sauce. People sometimes think that. It's published in every article in the Des Moines Register, right there, how we do it. But you look at it on paper and you go, it's too simple. This can't possibly work. And so far it has.
Yeah, it
But I'm
works.
prepared that one day it will not work, and that I'll blow up into tiny little pieces and be scattered across the city of Des Moines.
Well, what I think is that her methodology is really showing it's more truth based, and it's actually showing that this election is not a normal election. It's far different. People are not just voting partisan like they may have in previous years. There's very serious issues being raised, and we have like actual fascism threatening the country, and in women's rights at a major scale. I just think people can't overlook that. Like, I think it's like breaking them out of the, I guess, whatever the binds are of either apathy to vote, on a partisan level, and then on a across the lines level or bipartisan level. It's probably making them say, you know what, I don't care. This is my side. I just can't go along with that.
Well, may that not be today. The other note, you mentioned the congressional numbers at the top. There are 4 Republicans hold all 4 districts in Iowa right now. That Iowa 3rd district, which is around Des Moines, you showed the Democrat winning, but by a margin that feels potentially possible. It's a swing district. Des Moines has a lot of college-educated Republicans that are trending left. Then as you mentioned, the 1st district, which is Iowa City, which has a college, but then also some of rural, kind of eastern Iowa and some other of the smaller cities out there.
And the Quad Cities.
Quad Cities, Davenport. That had a big lead for the Democrats. And so I do wonder, do you look at that and think, I don't know, like this, I mean, obviously you're not going to change your results, but I just wonder if that 1st district congressional result gave you any kind of pause about the overall makeup of the state.
Well, keep in mind that we have been seeing something going on in the 1st district in terms of approval ratings, even for Joe Biden, for more than a year. And so when we would do briefings with the reporters and editors, I kept saying, what's going on in the 1st district? There's something going on in the 1st district. So this wasn't new, but it was something that caught our attention to have a lead that wide for someone from the opposing party. So we gave that extra attention and looked at it several different ways. And in the end, we had no reason to doubt. And keep in mind, we weight by geography as well. So there wasn't a way for us to be overrepresenting that district unless they're more in that district intending to vote.
So you said Monday night the unweighted was showing good stuff for Harris. When you saw the final numbers, which I guess would have been Friday morning, I'm just curious, what was your mental state there? Did you have were you starting to sweat at all looking at it? Did you look at it 2 times like I did and say, wait, she's really winning by 3?
We watch it day by day. So it was an incremental difference on Friday morning. I will say that my nephew is a senior at the University of Nebraska and currently interning at Gallup, interestingly enough. And he wanted to come and I wanted to have him here for this. And he walked in Thursday night and I had a folder. I had to swear him to secrecy. He has to take the oath. And he opened the folder and he couldn't believe what he was looking at. And his mouth sort of fell down to the kitchen counter. And it took him a while to wrap his head around it. So,
historic.
You're not alone in, first of all, not recognizing what the poll numbers meant, because your expectation was for a completely different difference. We do a preliminary briefing with the reporters and editors on Thursday. By the time we got there Friday, there was, we're settled on a plan of action for how to get the stories out. And I think I'd answered all of the questions people had about how could this be to their satisfaction. And now the voters will tell us.
Yeah.
We'll
You said it was changing incrementally through the week. Was it moving one way or the other through the week?
If you look at the rolling 2-day average or even a rolling 3-day average, it's pretty flat. Yeah. There's daily variation, as there is with any poll.
Sure. The last one of these that you had a miss on was 04, John Kerry. Does that one still haunt your dreams, or do you, or have all the successes since then washed that away?
I was just starting to get over it. Interesting. I was told by someone who had access to exit polls that not only would Kerry win Iowa, but by a wider margin than we thought. I had an incident where I ran into former Governor Terry Branstad. This is before his second reign. And he saw me in a conference room where he was the president of the organization. And he walked in and said to me, a long story, but the short of it is that because we had to stop polling then on Friday night, we couldn't have gotten the late Bush surge. There was a rally in Sioux City that he'd never seen anything like it in terms of the work that they were doing with the rally participants to have them go out and get more votes. And he said, you couldn't have caught that in your data. And the 4th district, which is where Sioux City is, came in with a big margin for Bush. And Governor Branstad claimed that rally was the reason Tom Daschle was evicted from his Senate seat in next door South Dakota.
South Dakota.
Wow.
So that was that was a gift to me for someone who understands where every vote is in this state to say your poll couldn't have caught it. It takes a few years for that pit in your stomach to resolve.
Well, I have a lot more L's than that, so you work your way through it. All right, last thing. Is there any? I mean, obviously, Wisconsin is not a mirror image of Iowa. There are differences in demographics. But is there anything you think can be learned about the other swing states from the data that you saw?
I said before, when people wanted to say, well, if this is going on in Iowa, this is what's going on in Wisconsin, that our state parties function very differently. Iowa is so much more red than Wisconsin is. Both houses of our state house are Republican by large majorities. Every statewide executive that's elected by the entire state are Republican, except for the auditor. And the entire Washington delegation is Republican. So it's hard to get more Republican than Iowa, and Wisconsin is more purple than that. I'm not going to say they're blue.
Sure.
They've moved back and forth more than Iowa has. So I don't think I can make any claim about Wisconsin unless we did our method in Wisconsin.
All right. Well, the whites seem kind of similar, though. The types of people, the Culvers, the kind of type of food that they're taking in. I don't know. I'm hoping to take some kind of cultural similarity between the Badgers and the Hawkeyes, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on Tuesday. Thank you so much.
They do have a professional football team, which we do not have.
That is true. Thank you so much, Ann, for coming on to the Bulwark podcast morning after the big poll. 47 for Kamala Harris, 44 for Donald Trump. We will see how things shake out on Tuesday, and hope to be in touch, I don't know, sometime before the 2027 2028 Iowa caucuses. All right?
Good to talk to you, Tim.
Awesome stuff. Okay, so here's what I think. Obviously, I'm not a pollster, not an economist of any sort, but I feel like while this indicates something specifically for Iowa, that maybe to a much lesser degree, it could also indicate for something for people across the country. Not necessarily because everybody thinks like people in Iowa, but because the issues that are hitting Iowa are also the issues that are hitting around everybody else in the country. So she even said it here that the candidates aren't spending a great deal of time or money on Iowa specifically in terms of like trying to convert voters one way or other. It's usually staunchly red, but if that is changing in that way, that means there's a major shift happening that on an organic level that could also speak to something that could be happening to people around the world. Of course, I'm not sure. This is just me surmising, but either way, this is very good for Kamala Harris. I'm not saying she will win Iowa. She probably will still lose Iowa, but the implications mean a whole lot more. So very good for Kamala, very bad for Trump. I don't think Trump is going to win anyways, but this is almost putting the nail in the coffin. Anyways, I'm going to continue to try to report more throughout the day. It's only 2 days before the election. If you guys can, please like and subscribe on the channel. I'm going to try to bring as much news as I can before the election. I may go live on election day. I'm not sure yet. The channel's still very new, and I have to work out the logistics of that. But in any case, I will catch you guys next time. Peace out.